He sneered at her hands and spat the word like a match. "Don't touch me, nurse." The room laughed, then stalled when his chest stuttered like a broken engine. She knelt anyway, and what happened next silenced everyone. The prison infirmary glowed with fluorescent hunger, a hard light that chewed the edges off everything. Waxed floor, hairline cracks, stainless carts with bandage rolls stacked like little moons. Night shift had run late. Morning shift had arrived early. The air carried bleach, burnt coffee, and the sour echo of men who hadn't slept. Guards leaned on door frames, trying for casual. The clock ticked loud enough to be a sermon. "Don't you put those black hands on me," the white inmate said, voice pitched to travel, to gather witnesses. He sat on the gurney, knuckles scraped, lips split, a triangle of blood drying on his cheek. The plastic wristband read Reese, Calvin M., and the number beneath it had lived longer than most promises. He jerked his arm away when she reached for the gauze. "I'd rather bleed out." The nurse was small the way Flint is small, compact, precise, made for friction and fire. Her name tag said S. Johnson, and the corners had been rounded by years of use. She wore her hair wrapped tight, her scrubs plain, her eyes untroubled. She didn't flinch when his spit landed near her shoe. She didn't look at the guards, who looked away at the same moment. She set the gauze back on the cart as if she had all the time in the world. A guard cleared his throat, the way men do when they want to be on record without doing anything at all. "You refusing care, Reese?" "I'm refusing her." He wanted the word her to bruise when it fell. He wanted it to knock papers from the clipboards, make the ceiling hum. He rolled his shoulders, showing off a cheap wolf tattoo whose teeth bled into blue. "Get me a real nurse." A couple of inmates waiting for meds snorted. One covered his mouth, eyes sliding to the cameras. Another stared at the floor tile where the wax pooled like quiet water. A young CO, badge too shiny, let a smile travel across his face and vanish. "Man's got a preference," someone muttered. And in rooms like this, preference was a mild word for something older and uglier. She spoke finally, and her voice held no rind of anger, only the clean center. "I'm the nurse on duty. You're bleeding. I'll help if you let me. Go play Florence Nightingale somewhere else." He turned to the room like a preacher to a choir. "You see this? They put them in charge, then expect us to thank them for it." The room went still. She had a way of being present that made people check their posture. No jewelry, no perfume, nothing to snag or catch. Just the steady pulse of competence. She picked up the saline, set it down, picked up the gauze again, set it down. He watched her hands as if they were weapons. She regarded his chest as if it held a map. "Refusal noted," the guard said, already bored with his own cowardice. He scratched something on a form. Paper-like things simple. Yes, no, refused, accepted, treated, untreated. Paper didn't have to sleep after the lights went out. She turned as if to leave, and Reese turned so he could be seen turning. A performance of victory in a room built to stage the opposite. He lifted his chin. "That's right. Walk." She paused at the door, the light limiting her profile in chalk. "I'll be right outside." He laughed, a short, brittle sound. "For what?" "In case you change your mind. A beat, half a second, like a hinge that hadn't decided which way to swing. Or in case your heart does." Nobody noticed the way his left hand flexed twice, slow. "Get me a real nurse," he repeated, but the energy had cooled. The line came out thinner, like a thread pulled wrong. The med queue shuffled forward. A man with a cough he'd named County Dust swallowed pills without water. Boots squeaked, pens clicked, radios burped. The guards practiced their inattention like a second language. The nurse stepped into the hall and washed her hands again, as if rinsing off the room's opinion of her. She watched the window that wasn't a window, just reinforced plexi with scratches that made every face look a little cut. Reese sat back on the gurney, triumphant in the way boys brag after outrunning a storm that wasn't coming for them. He told a story with his body. "Not today, not me, not by you." He passed his tongue over the split in his lip, tasted the metal, liked the proof of it. He didn't see the flicker in the monitor because he hadn't been hooked up. The nurse did. She heard the cough become a rattle. She looked at the way his shoulders tightened, not with swagger, but with something electric and wrong. She counted in her head, 1, 2, 3, the rhythm she used when the world pretended not to be on fire. She pressed the intercom once, a brief chirp. No one answered. The coffee machine in the break room coughed grounds into a paper throat. Somewhere a door sighed shut. "Hey," she said through the doorway, not stepping in, just the voice. "You feeling lightheaded?" He smirked to the audience, because the audience keeps a man's face on for him. "You worried about me now?" Her eyes dropped to his hands. Left hand flex again. Right hand a little slow on the return, skin above the sternum damp. She moved before permission could be arranged. 2 steps, 3, then she was at his side, and her hands, those rejected hands, were already doing a triage waltz: pulse, pupil, breath, skin. She stripped the bravado off the scene like bedding from a cot. He grabbed for a line to throw at her and found none. His mouth worked once, failed to find the air. The young CO stopped smiling. "Calvin," she said, first name steady as a bridge. "Look at me." She set a palm at the base of his throat, counting. "You have chest pressure?" He tried to wave her off, but the wave detoured, turned into a small, meaningless gesture, a man swatting a fly on the last day of summer. "Don't touch." It came out shredded. She snapped an order to the room that sounded like a bell. "Crash cart. Now." No one moved. She didn't raise her voice. She changed its angle. "Now." A guard fumbled the keys. Another remembered he had legs. The cart clattered, the sound of rehearsals waking. "Oxygen," she said, already fitting the mask. "Aspirin, chew." His face went gray the way concrete goes gray before rain. He tried to pull the mask away. She pressed it back like a blessing. "Vitals," the older CO called, pretending he'd started the entire idea. "Vitals." She met Reese's eyes. He had blue irises milked by fear. "You're having a heart attack," she said, clean and unequivocal. "We're going to help you." Even then, with the room tilting, the world tightening to a tunnel, the edges going soft, something ugly reached for the surface. "Don't want yours." It was the last full sentence he brought to the table. They had no idea who she really was. There are rooms that run on voltage and rooms that run on permission. The infirmary on most days needed both. She had learned to carry her own power, quiet as a well under a house. Years here had taught her the shape of panic and the discipline of not borrowing it. She had also learned how long a second can be when a man's heart forgets its job. She checked the watch she never removed, the one with a tiny nick near the 8, where an elderly patient had once grabbed her wrist in confusion and whispered, "Please don't let me sleep yet." The nurse could still picture his eyes when memory loosened its fist and let him step back into the room. She wore the nick like some women wear a cross. Breathe in for 4, hold for 2, speak on the exhale. She went to school late, raised a son early, worked nights that became years, sat for boards while her boy drew stars on the back of old envelopes. In the drawer by her bed was a letter with an official seal, the kind that makes neighbors look twice at the mailbox. Sometimes, on days like this, she would take the paper out and run a finger over the raised ink, the way you trace a scar to remember what healed and what simply learned to keep going. She kept her tone even. "Chew the aspirin," she told him, bringing the tablet to his mouth. His jaw worked by reflex, the body dialing past pride to reach survival. "Good," she said. "Resp 24, pulse irregular." She pointed the young CO to the leads. He fumbled. She guided his hands without scolding. "White to right," she said, and he startled at the rhyme like a boy in class. "Ma'am," he whispered, the word coming out thin, "aren't we supposed to wait for?" "We'll be done waiting before they finish deciding." It wasn't unkind. It was logistics. The older guard, Grant, 22 years deep, hovered near the door, torn between policy and the feeling in his bones that policy had never once resuscitated a man. "Nurse Johnson," he said, testing respect like a language he hadn't tried in a while. "You need backup?" "Tom," she said, giving him his name back. "Call Code Blue to medical and get the AED open." He nodded, phone already to his ear. Sometimes men do the right thing if you hand it to them with both palms. She felt the room lock onto her cadence. Reese's fingers twitched. He was 43, a body older than its math. Time had taught him to armor up on reflex, to wear contempt like skin, to make refusal a brand of weather he could carry into any room. He'd learned early that power could be borrowed by humiliating someone who couldn't or wouldn't fight back. It had worked so often he mistook it for a principle. He stared at her now like a man mapping a country he'd mocked on a postcard. Sweat beaded his forehead. Don't. He tried again, then lost the word and grabbed the edge of the gurney the way a child grabs the rail of a bed when dark takes the room too quickly. He looked smaller without vowels. She placed the sublingual nitroglycerin. Monitors chirped like worried birds. Tom wrestled with packaging. The young CO gave a running commentary mostly to himself. Okay. Radios hiccuped. Down the hall, someone coughed the cough that never graduated to anything diagnostic. EMS is en route, Tom said. 2 minutes out. 2 minutes is luxury. She folded a towel under Reese's neck. You tell me when the AED is ready. He stared at her gloved hands, the ones he had refused. They moved with an economy that had nothing to prove. One wrist anchored his flailing, not forceful, just certain. Another hand calibrated the O2. She reminded him, against his will, of a fourth-grade teacher who had looked at him and seen the boy's face before the mouth learned its cruelty. The memory embarrassed him. He tried to swat it away and only managed to smear his own fear across his cheeks. The room learned her name by how it sounded in a crisis, not by what was printed on the tag. She had a voice she used for chaos and another for after. This was the first. Stay with me, Calvin. He hated the name in her mouth. He loved the name in her mouth. It sounded like a person whose next second mattered. Outside, a stretcher rattled. The wheel caught a crack. Somebody swore. The doors flapped. EMS voices arrived all at once, each sentence beginning halfway through the thought, a language she spoke like a native. The lead medic, Diaz, met her eye and fell into step without ceremony. What have we got? Middle-aged male, chest pain with radiation, diaphoresis, irregular pulse, likely STEMI. Nitro given, aspirin started, O2 on, leads placed. He's crashing his own bravado. Diaz cracked and almost smiled, then watched the waveform. Copy. Starting IV now. You want to push? I've got it. No hesitation, no apology. A man who had refused her hands held her wrist like a rope. Somewhere beyond the glass, the prison continued its industrial breathing. Metal doors testing their hinges, men counting hours by meals that didn't change, a TV in a day room arguing with itself. In here, the world had narrowed to the size of a struggling heart and the people who'd shown up to support it. Miss, Reese tried, the word snagging, unpracticed. A lifetime of hey you and nurse and worse had made Miss feel like a costume he didn't deserve to own. I'm here, she said, and the sentence worked like oxygen. She had known anger long enough to know it didn't help with compressions. She had learned the geometry of rooms where men needed help from the very people they thought were beneath them. She carried the slight with the skill, not equal, not close, but stored in the same place because there's only so much space in a human chest. In her pocket, folded small, was a letter that could change the angle of the room. She didn't take it out. Not yet. Dignity doesn't hurry. The thing about cruelty is it needs an audience. The thing about survival is it doesn't care. As Diaz taped the line and the AED chirped its readiness, the hallway clotted with bodies who wanted to see the sequel to a humiliation and found themselves watching a woman put a man's life back into his ribcage. Some came to rubberneck, most stayed quiet, startled by the way competence rearranges a space. Clear, Diaz said out of habit, though they weren't shocking yet. Tom herded an inmate or two back with a chin. The young CO, name patch, Keller, remembered that doors can be helpful when closed and tugged one half shut. He kept his hand on the handle like a man learning the point of his own arm. Reese's chest hitched. His eyes rolled once, wild, then steadied on the nurse's face as if it were the only unmoving thing in a world gone seasick. He wanted to say something mean to get his balance back, but the words had fled, tired of being hauled around like luggage. He settled for breathing. The laugh he'd planted earlier died without a funeral. Pain level? She asked. He surprised himself. 8. It came out true, clean, stripped of performance. Good, keep telling me the truth. She glanced at the monitor. Diaz, ST elevation. We're buying minutes. He nodded at her. Your lead. The crowd pressed. The room exhaled. At the back, an inmate named Foster said softly, "Let the lady work," and earned a glare for it. The glare didn't land. "I said what I said," Foster added, voice getting braver with repetition. Keller glanced at him, at the nurse, at Reese, as if trying to triangulate where respect should be pointed. Reese's buddy from Yard, Harlan, a man who spoke mostly in brand names and threats, leaned in from the doorway. "Cal, you good? You don't need her." "Shut up," Reese gasped, and the shut up had none of its old venom. It sounded like a man closing a window against weather. The power map of the room redrew itself without asking permission. The nurse cut his shirt. The scissors bit fabric with a sound that always reminded her of kinder times, wrapping paper going, a birthday somewhere. She placed pads, checked leads. "I'm going to press here," she said, hand finding the sternum's sternest point. "It's going to hurt. Stay with me." "Do what you gotta," he whispered, and the phrase brought a hush because everyone had heard him say a different sentence not 10 minutes earlier. Harlan scoffed, desperate to salvage anything from the wreckage of a pecking order. "Look at that. Thought you didn't want." "Keller," Tom said, just loud enough. "Door." Keller shut it. The sound had weight. Rules can change, the nurse thought without thinking, and sometimes they do it one hinge at a time. Somewhere beyond, a radio crackled with an update that would matter later. "EMS transport bay ready," Diaz's partner called from the hall. "Cardio team on standby." "Copy," the nurse said, already preparing to move. "We're rolling in 30. She met Keller's eyes. "You're on the oxygen. Don't stare at me. Stare at the tank. You lose me a liter and I will haunt your report." "Yes, ma'am." The man was unadorned, almost grateful. Reese tried again. "Miss." He stopped, swallowed. "I'm sorry." It sounded like he'd found the phrase under a couch, dusty and half-broken, and decided to use it anyway. She didn't reward him with absolution. She didn't punish him with silence. "Save your breath," she said, and somehow it was kinder for being practical. Harlan muttered a slur at the glass. Tom heard it. The old man straightened like a gate noticing its posts. "Take a walk," he said, and his voice had the weight of a father who'd found his patience under the sink and dusted it off for one more try. Harlan didn't move. Tom did. The two guards who did nothing at first now overcorrected, the way people do when conscience claws back a little ground. Harlan backed up, hands up, laughed thin. "Just saying." The monitor piped a new rhythm, shaky but hopeful. "Load," Diaz said, practical as rain. They transferred Reese with a choreography earned in 100 bad mornings. The nurse counted down, 1, 2, 3, and watched his face for the flinch. He held her wrist again, not like a man claiming, like a man anchoring. She let him, for now. They pushed into the corridor. Men stood and watched, eyes on the nurse's hands. Someone said, "That's the one who," and stopped, embarrassed by the sentence they'd come to say. The hallway's noise bent around their little procession like wind around a stone. At the transport bay, the ambulance idled, lights tanning the concrete that strange emergency red-blue. The nurse paused to place a folded form in Tom's palm. "Witness statements," she said, quiet. "You know which ones matter today." He nodded, surprised to find himself the kind of man who suddenly did. They lifted Reese up. He looked at the ceiling of the ambulance as if it were the inside of a confession. He wanted to apologize better. He wanted to set the clock back 10 minutes and shut his mouth. But time, like dignity, prefers forward motion. "Stay with me," she said again, and he did. Somewhere, a printer began to spit out a memo that would change how mornings worked in this place. On the ride, Daz handled the radio and the nurse handled the man. She kept one gloved hand on his shoulder and one on the IV, the pressure of both reminding him he had weight and could still be pushed through this hour to next. Siren warbled, city blocks unspooled. A morning with ordinary errands cleared its throat to let them through. "ETA 3, Diaz said. "Cath lab prepped." He peeked at Reese, then at the nurse. "You calling it in?" "I already did," she said, and thumbed a number on the dedicated phone clipped to the wall. The line picked up on the second ring, a voice warm and brisk. "Director's office." "This is Nurse Simone Johnson, prison medical. STEMI inbound. Confirmed team assembled." "Confirmed," the voice said, some notes of recognition brightening. "We have you. The director will meet you Bayside." Diaz raised an eyebrow. "Director?" She didn't answer the look. "Not yet." They slid into the hospital's artery, the landing zone where routine looks like a miracle from the inside. Doors parted. People with names on their chests moved with the kind of speed that comes from practice and the habit of caring. Reese watched the ceiling lights pass and thought of all the ceilings he'd stared at, cheap, yellow, indifferent, and realized these were different. Softer, as if designed by someone who knew that people look up when they're scared. The gurney stopped. Footsteps approached with authority that didn't need to audition. White coat, gray at the temples, eyes that had learned the difference between attention and performance. "Simone," he said, and the name was a chord played clean. "What have we got?" "Director Hale," Diaz murmured, almost under his breath, because names carry gravity. "STEMI with irregular pulse," the nurse summarized. He refused care initially, accepted when the symptoms declared their intentions. "He's stable enough for now. Cath team's ready?" Hale nodded. "Always ready when you call." Diaz's eyes flicked between them. "You two know each other." "We do," Hale said. He turned to Reese. "Mr. Reese, I'm Dr. Hale. You're lucky this nurse was on shift. She saved more men in this city than any headline would bother counting." He looked back at Simone. "I'll take him up. You're scrubbing in?" "If needed," she said. A young resident jogged up, cheeks flushed. "Director, board chair's on line 2. They want confirmation." "Tell them Simone Johnson confirms. That'll be sufficient," Hale said, tone making room for no debate. Diaz finally asked the question that had been building since the bay. "I'm missing something." Hale smiled a little. "Simone isn't just our best trauma nurse," he said, for Diaz, for the watching techs, for anyone in earshot who still sorted the world by first glance. She's also the statewide chair for correctional health reform and the lead trainer for prison medical response across the region. When prisons break, she's the person they call to teach them how not to. The sentence landed like a gavel. The hallway grew a new kind of quiet. Keller, back at the gate, read the memo. His mouth actually fell open. Simone did not preen. She did not look to see who was looking. She checked Reese's line, adjusted the cannula, spoke to him like it was just them. "You're going to feel cold when they prep. That's normal. Focus on the ceiling tiles. There are 14 in a row. Count them if you need something to hold." He stared at her. "You? Chair, what?" "Put your breath on 4 counts," she said instead. "We'll talk later." They pushed through double doors. The world desaturated to procedure silver. A nurse at the station whispered, "That's her," and another shushed her, not unkindly, as if reverence had a volume setting. Reese looked for Harlan's face and didn't find it. He found Hale's, steady. He found Simone's, steadier. He felt a ridiculous urge to cry like a child who's been caught breaking and given a blanket anyway. The silence before the first incision felt like a room bowing its head. "Ready," Hale said. Simone nodded, and that tiny nod wrote her authority into the air, the way signatures make paper official. She stepped back to let the room do the part of the saving it specialized in. She taught classes here, stood at podiums that made her son tease, "Mom, you fancy," and always left before the applause got clever. She was here now, not as a speech, but as a pair of practiced hands embodied. They began. Reese lived. The artery accepted the stent like a bridge accepts cars after a flood. The monitor sang a steadier song, and the color returned to his face the way dawn sneaks back after a bad night. He woke groggy, throat raw, pride curled up somewhere out of reach. In the chair beside his bed, Simone was charting, the page a neat field of facts with no room for adjectives. "Hey," he rasped. "Hey." She didn't fuss. She offered water. She told him what had happened in a paragraph that respected his intelligence and ignored his past choices, because triage for dignity is real work too. He stared at the blanket. "I said some things." "You did." "They weren't, I've been like that a long time." She didn't volunteer to be his redemption. She didn't break him over the wheel of the moment. "You almost died," she said. That's plenty for one morning. He swallowed an apology that might mean something later. Back at the prison, policy had woken up. Tom, who'd found his spine where he left it years ago, filed a report with names spelled right and sentences that did not hide behind "incident occurred." Keller signed an addendum. I observed inmate Reese refusing care from Nurse S. Johnson using racially discriminatory language. When he experienced medical distress, Nurse Johnson provided life-saving care. It was a dry sentence that carried a small revolution. The memo that had started spitting from the printer grew teeth. Effective immediately, it read, refusal of care protocols will be adjudicated without regard to the race, gender, or identity of medical staff. Any discriminatory refusal will be logged, investigated, and may result in disciplinary action. Staff are authorized to override refusals when medical necessity is clear. It bore the warden's signature, and below it a name handwritten in blue, Simone Johnson, consultant. The blue wasn't decoration. It was a record. Doors don't change their swing all at once. They start closing softer. Harlan rolled his eyes at the memo until he saw Tom watching. Something in Tom's gaze said, I've got time today. And Harlan put the eye roll away like a tool that had gotten him nothing he wanted. A day later, Simone walked the infirmary with a clipboard and a calm that made men fix their posture. She didn't gloat. She asked questions like, where do you keep the AED batteries? And who opens the med line when the radio is down? The staff answered and found themselves telling the truth. We lose time on forms, one admitted. We don't have enough training on refusal override, another said. She wrote notes that would later become a new training module with her name on the bottom in small print. At Reese's bedside, a counselor from the hospital's rehab team stood with a brochure, the kind men wad up and toss until they don't. Reese didn't toss it. He tucked it into the blanket, annoyed at himself for meaning to read it. Simone stepped in. You'll be transferred back tomorrow, she said. Follow-up will be scheduled. You don't have to play tough with your own heart. He searched her face for condemnation, theater, anything he could fight. Found none. Why did you? You know. Because that's the job, she said simply. He shook his head. Not just the job. You could have let me. I don't let people die to prove a point, she said. A half-beat of silence. And I don't accept being refused because of the color of my skin to keep anyone else comfortable. He blinked fast, a man not used to salt water. Back inside, consequences turned their gears. Reese's disciplinary record acquired a note about discriminatory conduct in a medical setting. It wasn't the heaviest hammer the prison could swing, but it struck where it counted. Privileges trimmed, movement monitored, counseling required. Harlan earned a separate write-up for escalating language in a medical area. Tom received a commendation he tried to refuse and then accepted, embarrassed, because Keller clapped him on the back like a son who'd watched his father do something right. In the staff lounge, someone taped a photo to the bulletin board. Simone shaking hands with Director Hale months ago at a training graduation, both of them laughing at something small and human. Below it a handwritten line, respect is a habit, practice daily. The line wasn't signed. Everyone recognized the handwriting anyway. Keller's blocky, careful print. The day Reese returned, the infirmary smelled like lemon cleaner and do-over. Men watched him the way yard dogs watch a storm-wet cat, curious, cautious, a little entertained. He sat quietly. He didn't perform. He looked at the ground where his spit had landed and felt foolish in a way that might grow into something useful. Simone passed by. He started to stand, then realized how absurd that was, standing to honor the person you'd refused to let touch you an hour you could have died. He settled for words. Miss Johnson. He said the name like a sentence that fit in his mouth now. She paused. Mr. Reese. Thank you, he said in the room, without meaning to, leaned in. You're welcome, she said, then added, drink water, walk slow, let your heart be a student for once. A door down the hall closed soft, and nobody flinched. Let me tell you the truth, the way old men tell it, when the day has burned to embers and the cicadas are tuning their small engines. Respect doesn't show up in a uniform. It doesn't wear a badge like a crown or ride a siren like a parade. Respect is a habit you build with your hands when you think no one is keeping the ledger. It's the way a woman steadies a room with skill, the way a man learns to close his mouth before it writes his name in dust. The way a guard remembers his job is to open a door for justice before it knocks twice. People think justice is a hammer. Most days it's a hinge, quiet, oiled, reliable, swinging the same way for everyone. In a prison that had taught men to be loud to feel large, a nurse worked small and exact, and a heart that would have stopped kept going. The memo mattered. The write-ups mattered. The training mattered. But what changed the angle of the light was simpler. Hands that knew their work. A voice that refused to be pulled into the ditch. A refusal to refuse a life because the mouth attached to it had said ugly things. That's not sainthood. That's practice. Remember this. Respect doesn't come from titles. It comes from how you treat people when you think no one's watching. And if you want a picture to keep, take this one. Fluorescence humming a little softer, footsteps passing without hurry, a room exhaling like it finally found its lungs. The night crew will mop, the morning will come, and somewhere a heart that used to run mean will pace itself to a better beat, quiet as a prayer said with the light off.